This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guests and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
It's 6 o'clock and time again for Brain Matters, the official radio show of the UA Counseling Center. We are broadcasting from the campus of the University of Alabama. Good evening. My name is Dr. B.J. Guenther, and I'm the host of the show, along with my colleague and producer, Catherine Howell. And in case you don't know, this show is about mental and physical health issues that affect college students, and in particular, UA students. So you can listen to us each Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on 90.7 FM or online at wvuafm.ua.edu. Or you can also listen to download my Tuner Radio app and just type in WVUA FM 90.7. Also, if you've got any ideas for upcoming shows for the rest of this semester or for the fall semester, we do not do shows in the summer. Email those to me at brainmattersradio@wvuafm.ua.edu, and I'll consider using those ideas. Tonight's Brain Matters is a little bit different. We are doing a little bit different format because we are celebrating 10 years of being on the air. We actually started in January of 2013, and to be honest, our first year was rough since I had no experience with radio, and many times we would need help with technical issues, which can be scary for live radio. And tonight's format, like I said, is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have three guests on who I feel like they might not feel like this, but I feel like they were instrumental in helping make the show possible. My first guest tonight is Dr. Bernadette Peters, not the Tony Award-winning actress. Everybody always asks me that. And for those of a certain age, you can remember Bernadette Peters. When I began doing research on starting a live mental health radio show on a college campus, Dr. Peters was really the only professional I found actually hosting a mental health radio show on the air. And her show was called Shrink Wrap, and it aired on the campus of Niagara University. So she's with us tonight. Thank you for being on the show, Dr. Peters.
Thank you for inviting me.
So that was a long time ago. I bet you were surprised when I reached out to you.
I sure was.
How long? Tell us, first of all, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, where you're located, and your credentials.
Yeah. So at the time of the show, I was at Niagara University. I was the assistant director of the counseling center. It was my first job right after my doctoral internship. And now I left there right before when I had my first child. So now I'm just doing private practice. I'm located virtually in Lockport, New York, which is outside of Buffalo. I'm about to start an EMDR certification training. I'm really excited about that. And I do not have a current radio show, but I'm considering it in the future.
Well, it takes this probably from experience. I mean, how long did you do Shrink Wrap? And tell everyone how difficult or easy maybe it was to start the show and actually organize the show and actually do a show like that. Was it a live radio show?
It was live. Yes. It was once a week for an hour like yours. And the hardest part for me was the technical stuff. I did not have somebody sitting in the studio who knew how to do all of that. I did get set up from the student director who directed, I don't remember what it stood for, WNIA radio. So it was online. And I believe it was FM2, but I'm not positive. So he got me situated. I was literally taking notes right as he was speaking, like how to answer a phone and stay live, and how do I play music, and that was the hardest. But in terms of organizing the show, it was my show. I picked the topics. I picked my guests. that part to me was the easy part.
Yes.
Because I love talking to people and interviewing. I think it's harder for the guest.
Was it strictly, was your show strictly, was it college mental health or all mental health in general? And was it a call-in show too?
Yeah. Yes. So it pertained to college student mental health and wellness. So I did a lot of on-campus departments I would interview. So not all mental health related, but more wellness. So I had campus safety, campus athletics,
yes,
career counseling. I would interview the directors or whoever was available so that students could listen without having to call the department and know what services were on campus for them. So that was a big portion of my show. I think you had asked when I started it. I believe it was 2009, and it went until I left in September of 2011. So it was about a year. It was about 1.5 to 2 years is what I recall. And
did you ever find anybody else who was doing a show similar to yours? Because I found one other person in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. I talked to him too at the University of Alaska, but his format, I can't remember the name of the show, but his format was a little bit different. It mixed, I know this sounds odd, but it mixed mental health with like heavy metal music.
Okay.
I know. And I don't, like I said, I don't remember the name of it, but I really was just trying to get some ideas on how to approach administration. And my next guest after you is going to be our former executive director of the Counseling Center. And I was very nervous about that because the way I wrote up the show originally was a call-in format. And it was very difficult for me to like understand how we would handle, if it's a live radio show, how would we handle call-ins if there was a crisis or if someone threatened to harm themselves on the air. So we had to go through, and I'll talk about this in the next segment with our executive director. We had to go through some steps to make that happen. But that was always a scary thing, a scary thought for me. How did you handle that? And how did you pitch this to your administration?
Right. So we had at Niagara University, we had a general counsel person. So I had to meet with her and to go over the terminology I had to use before every show. And that part was pre-recorded. A student actually read it to cover the legal stuff, to say, there's not a professional relationship established. That's right. The host or the guest. This is for educational purposes only. So it was that in the beginning, and I believe at the end it was the same thing. It was a little bit different because it was the close of the show. So we had to play that every time. In terms of reaching out to administration, I think it was probably my idea to do a radio show in terms of outreach because I could reach so many more people on campus and off campus. My direct boss at the time was the director of the Counseling Center. He was all for it. I don't know if we needed anyone else's approval. Probably the, I'm forgetting the title, Student Affairs Director.
Yes.
I'm guessing had to approve it. And I don't believe there were many obstacles. As long as I had the legal side covered, I had to arrange my schedule. That was probably one of the most difficult in addition to the technology aspect. But did I answer your question?
Yeah, you answered it. And I think, would you say the technology was the negatives,
yes,
to doing the show? And obviously, what were some of the positives? Did you receive a lot of positive feedback from the community? And how far out? People are always asking me, how many listeners do you have? And here at Alabama, we never can know exactly how many listeners because we're regulated the way I understand it. And Terry Siggers is going to be on our show. He's going to do the last segment of this show. He's assistant director from Office of Student Media. But, people are always asking me, how far out does the signal go? How can people listen? So for you, do you know how many listeners you had? Could you gather that?
I can't recall, but there were analytics. And so I do, and because it's online, anyone could listen with internet connection. And I do remember one show, I had somebody from Rome listening. And I don't know if I knew that because of the analytics they were running or because I had somebody from campus ministry. It was her friend, and it was a priest in Rome, and he said he's listening to the show right now, probably when she was on. I thought that was really neat.
That's amazing, yes.
but I'm not. I'm trying to remember the graphs, and I think it showed peak times and what shows had the most listeners. But those details are a bit fuzzy. But to answer your question, the hardest part, technologically speaking, was when somebody would actually call in, which were very few. Most of the people actually did instant messaging, which I preferred because that was easy. And I had a co-host, I think about half the time, somebody else from the counseling center. So one of us could be answering the IM.
A screener, basically.
Yes. Even though we would share the dialogue part. I much preferred IMs. I told the listeners as I would introduce the show, you can call in. This is the number, but bear with me because I'm the one answering the phone.
Right.
And I'm on the air. So that was by far the most difficult thing. And
I can totally relate to that because when we started, like I said, I originally wrote it up as a call-in. The issue for our station was we didn't have a delay switch at the time. So that has been put in, that was installed. It was probably a couple of years later. Okay. So we actually attempted to do a call-in show. I would still love to do that format, but it's like you said, it's a little more difficult trying to run the board. Fortunately, Catherine does that. And also having a screener to make sure that, that you can answer the questions, but also that there's not a crisis involved too. And you might need to get some help.
Right. We never ran into that. And honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of interaction live. I do remember getting emails after the show.
Yeah, we take emails. We have taken emails, and also we don't do instant messaging anymore. But emails definitely is how we usually answer questions on the air. But it seems to me like the positives, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback. The program actually won an award. I think I'm looking at it on the wall in 2015 for Program of the Year for the American College Counseling Association. So that's something
fantastic.
We're very proud of. And, it's really gotten to be where more people have heard the show. And we've finally gotten on Apple Podcasts a couple of years ago. So that's helped. Most of our podcasts are on audioboom.com, but that's really helped get the word out a little bit too. But really, for us, the signal goes about 15 miles. At night, sometimes it'll go further.
Yeah.
But not very far at all. But there's just no way to know how many people are really listening. Yeah. It's something else. Did you ever get any recognition for your show at all?
On the campus?
Yeah.
I don't.
It takes a lot of work, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I think it was very new to the campus. To do this kind of thing, So I'm sure I had colleagues in other departments say this, how neat is that? Or I heard your show. And some of the times we would do shows on things that students wouldn't necessarily come to counseling about because they were intimidated or too vulnerable. So we would talk about sexual assault and date rape and different topics like that my goal is hopefully to reach people and give them some resources that would never walk foot into the counseling center or to anybody's therapy.
Oh yeah. What was your most difficult interview? Can you disclose?
Difficult.
Yeah. Can you remember?
Most interesting?
Okay, go with that.
I don't remember. I always prepped my guests like you did for this show with the questions. I think the most difficult part of interviewing is if somebody had to cancel at the last minute. And then I always have a backup plan to how to fill the hour, which mental health, there's so many different topics. I don't think that was that difficult. But I had two pretty interesting shows. One, I was taking martial arts at the time, and I had the director of the program come on, and I wanted to do a live show and a demonstration in the campus common area. And that part didn't work. And I think it was because of something legal with a liability. But I thought that would have been really neat. And if I had more time in it, I would have, because he would have done it. He loved teaching. And so he would have brought one of his instructors.
Yeah.
Instruction or a demo. But probably the most interesting, and I believe I had this guest on twice, was Confessions of a Bartender. And so this is a friend who was, he had his master's degree in, I think, math, but he had been a bartender. And so I brought him on and we talked all things relationships and date rape, drugs, and how to safe while you're out drinking. And that one was pretty popular. I definitely got feedback from that one. And
I might have to do that. That's a great topic.
It was fun. And that same friend, the reason why I said I am thinking about doing a radio show again, has a coffee shop, and he has the capability of doing a podcast. So we have talked about maybe coming together, and I'll be a guest on his show.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. This is so interesting. Yeah, people, when I started this, I thought, how am I going to come up with so many topics, But you're right. With mental health, there's always trends that are changing, and with college mental health, and even some of this, I always say this, even with your standard diagnoses of anxiety or depression, even test anxiety or stress management, you need to revisit that every so often. You could literally do that every year and have a different show, depending on your guests. So, hey, I told you this would go by fast, and I probably should have had you on for longer, but we're going to go to our next segment. So thank you for being on the show. I just don't think you realize how important it was, that first conversation that we had. And you really gave me the right kind of tips that helped me be able to formulate, like a plan to go to my administrator and be like, hey, this is what I want to do, and I've done the research. So you were instrumental.
Oh, I'm so glad, and congratulations on the success of your show and for inviting me, Dr. Guenther.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening. We'll be in touch.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm Dr. BJ Guenther, and we're talking tonight. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary here at Brain Matters. We started in January 2013, and my first guest was an inspiration for me to do the show. I actually talked with her when I was researching on how to do a show like this. But my guest now is our former executive director of the Counseling Center, Dr. Lee Keys. Lee, thanks for being on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tell us what you're doing now.
Well, I'm as a semi-retired or mostly retired psychologist. I do as much teletherapy or as much consultation work as I want to do, as much or as little as I want to do. So I get to be very picky. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
What about, when I came to you to talk to you about this show, what'd you think? What was the first thing you thought? Because I researched it. I think you know this, but I researched it for about a year because I really didn't think you were going to go for it, to be honest. I really didn't think anybody was going to be on board because of the liability. And just speaking with Dr. Peters, I asked her, how did she pitch it to her administration? And she really, it seems like it wasn't that difficult. And she said there was some legal aspects to it, but she didn't mention meeting with the attorneys or even risk management like we had to.
Yeah. Well, everything that I knew about it, I learned from you. I knew nothing whatsoever about this topic, had never heard of anybody doing it.
No.
I thought it was a great creative approach to reach people. So I was really interested in that, but I needed to have some T's crossed and I's dotted with the risk management aspect of it. And you and I sat down with the attorneys and risk management people at one point And, once that was taken care of, I was like, well, let's go for it.
Yeah, I was nervous because when I originally wrote it up, her show was a live call-in show. And so I was, I wanted to do that. But the issue at the radio station, and Terry Siggers is going to be on the segment following you, and he can probably talk more about this. The problem was there wasn't a delay switch. So that made me very nervous. And I think it made the attorney very nervous too, because of the potentiality that somebody could call in and threaten to harm themselves or harm somebody else. And what would we do? So when we first started out, we really weren't ready to do the call in because they didn't have a delay switch at the station either.
Oh, they have one now? Is that correct?
They have one now. They had one installed for our show about 2 years after, and when they moved to the new station. For those listening, we were originally located in Pfeiffer Hall, which is right in the center of campus and where the School of Communication is. And they moved the radio station and student media kind of on the outskirts of campus. And at that point, they did install a new system and a delay switch, which still made me nervous because you still had to have screeners to help with screening the calls. And we did do a call-in show for a little while, but there wasn't a lot of response.
Did you ever have to use the delay switch?
No, and that it was a little. Catherine, were you trained on the delay switch also?
I think so.
There was a little more to it than just flipping a switch, if I remember correctly. I mean, it sounds, the nickname is the kill switch because you can just cut it out. But there's how many seconds? It's like 7 seconds. There's a 7-second delay, and then it has to reboot if you use that switch. So we had kind of a little plan, and still do if we ever want to go back to that, kind of a little plan of what we would do. Like if somebody called and somebody made a threat, for instance, we would hit the switch and then we would take care of the call because the screener would be able to direct that person or get help for that person. But right. we never had to do that, fortunately.
Well, I think even so, the benefits of doing this far outweigh whatever risks might happen. They'll probably be rare or infrequent.
Yeah.
So
we get questions, we get email questions, and, Terry and student media always wanted us to have a Facebook page or a social media presence. And I'm really glad that you basically said no to that, because I could not fathom, and you couldn't either, how it could be monitored. And I just think that could possibly be a disaster for us and even more liability.
Yeah. And I still feel that way. And I'm aware of other places that do have a social media presence, but it does take quite a bit of administrative time to manage all that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I think what's helped us, radio, it feels like sometimes radio is not as popular as podcasts. So I think when we started going, our show, most of our shows are at least on audioboom.com, but about 2 years ago, we started being podcasted to Apple. So that changed things as far as more people being able to listen to our past shows.
Yeah. I'm curious, how many total shows have you had in 10 years?
We decided to do a 10th anniversary show as opposed to a certain number. Catherine made the suggestion in the fall of let's do a 200th show. And I started counting them, and they're over 200 now. I mean, we have done about 12 to 13 shows every spring and fall semester for 10 years. There was a break during COVID. We had started in 2020, March 2020 is when COVID hit and everything shut down. We had done probably 3 or 4 shows, maybe more than that already. And then I cannot remember if we did any in the fall of that year of 2020. So that's the only time there's been a true break, So it's been over 200 shows. And we have replicated some shows with topics like depression and anxiety. But a lot of shows, I think the most difficult show I've done has been with people who just don't talk a lot. I know I talk a lot, but you have to kind of carry a show like this. But there have been some guests on that have been really difficult to engage.
I imagine so. But when you told me it had been 10 years, I couldn't believe it.
I know. It's hard to believe.
I know. Time has gone by fast.
Yeah, and we've gotten some recognition. I'm fortunate and grateful to you for letting me go to Louisville, Kentucky to accept the award for the program of the year from the American College Counseling Association, which was a big deal and gave our show some credibility. I also, with your support, was able to present at the state conference for the Alabama Counseling Association about doing a show like this. And it was very, people were very intrigued. Dr. Peters said that people are always kind of intrigued because there's just not a lot of this going around. There's a lot of mental health podcasts, but there's just not a lot of live radio that's just about college mental health.
Very interesting. Well, that makes you a trailblazer.
Yeah, I guess the trailblazers are either really, really old or dead. But I'll take that. I'll take that as a compliment. Yeah. Can you remember has there been like a topic that stuck out to you that I did when you were here, or maybe one that you haven't heard us do that you would suggest that we would do?
Let's see. It's been a while. I know I tuned in a number of times. There was one that you did, I believe, on self-harm related stuff. And if my memory is that Dale Wisely was the presenter.
He was wonderful.
Yeah, I know Dale really well.
He was wonderful. He was on probably one of the first few shows. Yeah.
And, that's a sensitive subject. And I thought that was a good test run to see how that kind of thing goes,
Yes.
So do you recall what that was like in terms of the feedback you got or the activity?
It was so long ago. And I think I've had other shows about self-harm on since then. I think I have, but it is a sensitive subject, just like suicide is a sensitive subject. I was always, that's always something. Self-harm and suicidal ideation, I feel like, is very important to talk about, but you have to be careful too, especially with this age group, to not cause, to not cause it, I guess you could say, or not trigger somebody.
Yeah, I have seen or heard some things that sort of glamorized it or went a little too far with that. So, but I thought you guys handled that really well.
Well, with each of these shows, I try to prepare people, just like I sent you questions, and sometimes I don't get to those questions, but I try to prepare people so that they can kind of know what direction we're taking and to not veer off of that much. Because at first I didn't know what I was doing. It's scary to think about some of the things that I said. Terry told me, he said, there's a few things you can't do. You can't say commercial and you can't cuss on the air. So, with me, that was 1 out of 2 it bad. But some topics are very sensitive. I think preparation is the best way to handle that. And fortunately, with some of these can be edited and you can edit some of the stuff out. But when it's a live show, it's live on the air. So you don't know how somebody's going to answer. Your guests, you don't know how they're going to answer. And we've had guests on before who I could see where it was going really quick. And I either had to take a quick break or, Catherine and I will look at each other like, oh my gosh, here it comes. Let's get out of this, and have to go that route.
Well, that's great that you're on top of it like that. That's a really responsible thing to do.
Did you ever receive comments about the show from other people?
I did. I recall people in the administration that I was working in at the time, including upper administration, who just thought it was a great outreach thing for a college counseling center to do, since there were so few people doing
it's
it.
way different. Yeah.
Is it different now, or more centers doing this kind of thing?
No, it's way different to have a show like this even now, because when I presented at the conference, at the state conference, I had a lot of people attend the session, and they were, like I said, very intrigued, but afterwards or during, they asked all kinds of questions, and I think people are just afraid to do it. They're afraid of a lot of things, afraid of the response possibly, but afraid of the time and effort it does take. But like you said, it's a great outreach opportunity for other counseling centers if you have the staff and you have the support.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was always a big believer in getting the word out in as many different ways as we can, because we can't just stay in the office and hope that people know what we do and understand what we do and want to come in. So, I think it's a really important initiative to do.
It's a good marketing tool too, like you said, because like you said, for a long time, it was just hard to get make our services known. And now, I have students commenting that they've seen the advertisements for upcoming shows on the digital signage, in all the buildings, and they publicize our shows sometimes on the radio station, and that helps too. But also just to be able to have some advertising in the waiting room here at the counseling center means a lot. I have parents who call and ask, and even people, staff who we are newly employing and hiring are asking and intrigued about the radio show. So that's kind of neat too.
Interesting. That's you've done a fabulous job with it. You really have.
Thank you. I'm going to let you go and get back to your life, teletherapy.
Okay.
And we've got another segment after this. So thank you again, Dr. Keys, for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, and congratulations on 10 years, okay?
Thank you. We'll be back. You're listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone.
WVUA-FM, Tuscaloosa.
This show is not a substitute for professional counseling, and no relationship is created between the show host or guest and any listener. If you feel you are in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, we encourage you to contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company. If it is an emergency situation, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Hey, you're back listening to Brain Matters on 90.7 The Capstone. I'm Dr. BJ Guenther, and we're talking tonight. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary of being on the radio station here at the University of Alabama on 90.7. And I cannot believe it's been that long. It was January of 2013 that I actually started doing the show. And my next guest, I just don't think we could not do it without Terry Siggers. Terry is the assistant director from the Office of Student Media, and he has been instrumental in everything from answering our questions, training us on, the technological side. He's just been the backbone. And also, we've had some emergencies when we couldn't get on the air, because doing a live show is not easy sometimes. There has to be a lot of preparation, and a lot of things have to happen for it to be on the air. And Terry's the one who we would always call. So thank you, Terry, for being on the show.
Oh, you're being way too kind. You guys have been great, and there have hardly ever been late night phone calls.
How long have you been with the University of Alabama?
Well, I've been working full time at the university for 21 years now.
Wow.
Before that, I was a student worker. So I've I've been associated with WVUA since '94.
I was talking to Dr. Keys about how we started the show and how I was nervous actually going to him because of the liability of doing a live radio show. And I can't remember how we approached you or how you got involved, but when I first approached you, if I remember correctly, there were no other UA staff members doing any kind of show. It was completely student run. And I'll be honest, it still is student run, but there was only students doing shows. And I was very nervous about that because I just didn't want to be treated any differently, from them. And I didn't want students to see me as getting like special, attention or anything like that. I just wanted to do a show where we could talk about college mental health. So when you were approached or when I talked to you the first time, what did you think?
Well, it's always been a part of our charter that faculty and staff can participate at the station. We just put a priority on students working at the station. They get priority on time, and also our management team are all students. But so we back when the station first started. And Jeremy Butler, who's now on WUAL doing a show, when he was the advisor, he actually had a show on the station as well. So we've had some staff members
do shows
come
before.
in, do shows before they tended to drift in and out. I'm happy to say that you guys are the most long-lasting partnership that the station's had, and I think it's been a great and fruitful partnership for the both of our departments.
I'll ask you this. I asked Dr. Keys this. Have you gotten positive comments about the show? I don't want to know about the negative ones. Have you gotten positive comments about the show from other staff members across campus or outside in the community?
Oh yeah. I mean, every year there's I get comments, especially within our division, on the quality of the show, and that we've had this partnership, which I know Dr. Hood right now is putting a focus on interdepartmental partnerships, and we're able to kind of point to this and say, hey, look, we've already been doing it. We've been ahead of the game.
Oh yeah, award-winning show.
Yeah,
award-winning show. You can add that to it too.
Exactly. And this also once we had your show going, this led to a second partnership with us at the station with the UREC and Student Health doing Fit to be Tied.
Yes, I've been a guest on that show, and they've been a guest on my show.
Yeah, and I love all that you guys are always willing to do cross promotion and work with each other. So this is. It's a partnership that it's a kind of project that I was glad you came to me about, because it was on my radar wanting to do something that's a little bit more long lasting, since the bulk of our shows are student run, they tend to be transient, and but it's always great to have some benchmark kind of programming that people could count on from year to year.
That's a good point. What are some, when we've done the live show, what are some of the challenges of doing a live show? I was talking about on the segments before about my anxiety when it comes to doing a live show and the liability. And when we first started, it was really, we didn't have a delay switch. I really didn't know a whole lot about that. And since then, there's been a delay switch installed at the station. But what are some of the challenges?
Some of the challenges are always, when you're live, especially without any kind of safety net like a delay switch. As soon as something goes out there, it's out there. It's not like with paper where there's a editing process that you can catch mistakes. So that's when you're live, that's always a concern. But also, technology being what it is, there's always going to be something that goes wrong.
Yes.
And, it's just all about being nimble enough to roll with the punches. And if there's a technical problem, that, having some options on getting around when technology just doesn't want to cooperate with you.
Yes, I mean, it's the kiss of death when you have, my husband has a background in telecommunication and film is what they used to call it here, the degree. Mm-hmm. And he used to always tell me, oh, don't have dead air. Dead air is the enemy, no dead air. And so sometimes that's happened when we've, not understood how to work certain things. But for the most part, we try to avoid dead air, I think the two things you told me not to do on the air is say commercial, because we are not for profit, station, and don't cuss on air. So I've tried to keep within those lines. What about, I want to give credit to the students who help us every year. I mean, it's amazing. When I started out, I had students who would help me actually produce the show, and they were so reliable. And then the station managers usually change every year, so we would have to get to know the station managers, the production person, and the editing person. And it's just been remarkable. So give them some credit and talk about some of how they get involved and what they do for us.
Yeah, well, I'm count myself as extremely lucky. We have excellent students that make their way over to the station, and even the ones that don't want to do this as a career take it very seriously while still managing to have a lot of fun. So we, everything down to our program director who niches off the time slot every year for the show without I think there was only one year where we had a issue with getting you guys scheduled at your normal time, and then having our production person that then takes your recordings and sweetens it up and gets ready for the podcast edition and getting it up on our Voices
.ua.edu, which I always try to make that announcement at the end of the show where people can listen. Speaking of podcasts, Terry, do you think, is radio still effective, with all the podcasts that are available now? Do you feel like radio is still effective?
Oh yeah. Well, of course we can only go off of market studies, but market studies show that radio still isn't going anywhere. But while it's not a medium that people sit around their houses and listen to as much more, most people still listen to radio in their car rather than podcast and satellite radio, most people are still listening to terrestrial radio.
Yeah,
so
I still get people commenting, those people who work, staff members who work in Birmingham are able to hear the show at night on their way home to Birmingham. I get this question a lot. How many students or how many people are listening to the show? And also, how far does the signal go? Can you explain those two things?
Yeah, well, as far as how many people listen to the show, we don't subscribe to ratings. Most stations subscribe to ratings as a way of selling advertisement.
Right.
We don't sell advertisement, and we can't use those numbers for soliciting sponsorship. The cost is prohibitive for us to get that data. But I can tell you, as far as our reach goes, going towards the north end of the county, we start to lose our signal around the Mercedes plant in Vance.
Yes.
We going west, we're started losing out in Coaling. Then
so it's really it could be like maybe about a 20-mile radius from the campus. Would you say about that much?
Yeah, because and going south, we start petering out around Mountainville, so we get an amazing reach for our little 240 watt station. We have excellent tower placement, which we'll see how they'll be moving our antenna to a different tower in the next couple of years. We'll see how that affects our reach.
And that kind of transitions into my last question for you. Like, how do you see the show growing or changing in the years to come? Or what would you like to see change, expand, or grow in the future?
I don't know. I feel like you guys do a great job at what you do. I guess I really don't see any big changes coming other than anything that you guys would like to do.
I've always got ideas. It's just having the time, the energy, the resources. Yeah. I don't know if you knew this or not. Maybe I told you this. We did win the Program of the Year award for the American College Counseling Association, and that's something to be so, proud of. But also, I've presented a few times at conferences, and always have a good turnout in my sessions because people are very intrigued and they're very interested in possibly doing something like this on their campuses. But I think it takes a lot of work and preparation, and you have to have administration behind you and supportive of you. And there's a lot of factors that go into making something like this happen. And you're one of the big reasons that, we're still doing this show, and you've made it so seamless, and easy for us. So thank you, Terry.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and you guys put a lot of work into it, and it shows. You guys make my job easy. Thank you.
That makes me feel good. I appreciate it. This has been a fun show and one that I've wanted to do for a while. Lee asked us how many shows we've actually done, and it's over 200. I mean, when Catherine and I were talking about doing something like this, we were talking about like maybe the 200th show, but when I looked at it, we had actually gone past 200. So we decided let's just do a 10th year show. So we've done so many, and I've got so many more ideas planned. So I'm excited about finishing out this semester and then starting back in the fall, hopefully.
Well, great. And every time I get a press release that looks like something that you might be interested in, I'll try to forward it on.
Please send it my way. We'll always consider that. And if you're listening now and you have some show topics for us that you'd like us to do, email those to brainmattersradio@wvua.fm.ua.edu. And I'll consider using your show topics. Thanks again to all my guests tonight. I want to remind you, don't forget our shows are recorded and podcasted on the Apple Podcast, audioboom.com, and voices.ua.edu. You can just type in Brain Matters and you'll find some of our past shows. There's also a link to voices.ua.edu on the Counseling Center's website at counseling.ua.edu. I like to mention who made the show possible. There's 3 people we just had on who helped make the show possible, but also our current executive director, Dr. Greg Vanderwall, here at the Counseling Center, my production assistant, Catherine Howell. She's also my colleague here, my other colleagues at the Counseling Center who are so supportive, the WVUA staff and students who edit our show and give me advice and suggestions, and of course my guest tonight, Dr. Bernadette Peters, Dr. Lee Keys, and Terry Siggers. Don't forget, we're back on next week. Join us for another show, and the topic is going to be becoming a better storyteller. So hang in there this week and listen to us next week. You've been listening to Brain Matters on 90.7. Good night.
This show is not intended as a substitute for professional counseling. Further, the views, opinions, and conclusions expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own and not necessarily those of the University of Alabama, its officers, or trustees. Any views, opinions, or conclusions shared on the show do not create a relationship between the host or any guest and any listener, and such a relationship should never be inferred. If you feel you're in need of professional mental health and are a UA student, please contact the UA Counseling Center at 348-3863. If you are not a UA student, please contact your respective county's crisis service hotline or their local mental health agency or insurance company.